I do want to welcome you all here today. We have a nice little turnout today, I'm glad to say. And we have Kay McInnes from Lexington Medical Center, who is going to be speaking to us today on healthy eating guidelines, basically giving us a refresher course. Kay is a registered dietitian and also a licensed dietitian, and she is one of the diabetes educators at Lexington Medical Center. She had previously worked at Providence, where she served in the same role, which is where I first saw her doing one of their diabetes, basically like a cook and learn support group meeting, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
That was
Hopefully,
fun.
hopefully they'll eventually let us do something like that at Lexington. I've always wanted to do something like that. But you will
I'm working
enjoy.
on it.
Oh,
I'm
very
working on
good. Very good. So hopefully once that's off the ground, we can let you all know about that as well. But tonight she's going to talk with us, like I said, about healthy eating guidelines, give us a good refresher. Kay, I don't know if you're one who likes for people to be unmuted so they can answer questions and talk back to you then, or do you want us all to stay muted and answer questions at the end? How do you like to work?
No, let's all talk to each other.
All right. All
Yeah.
right. So the few people who have yourselves muted, feel free to unmute yourselves if
Yep.
you'd like. And like I said, give Kay some good feedback, ask questions as you see fit. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the presentation unless you want to say something else, Kay, before we get started.
No, I'm good. Hey, y'all. That's usually how I start everything I do, with a hey, y'all. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for letting me come. And I tried to go through and look at some different things, and I've looked at the new updated standards that have recently come out, so we can talk about those. But if you guys have got questions as we go, I'm not sure if I'll know all the answers, but stop me. I've got a pad, and if I don't know the answers, I am happy to research the answers, because there's so much to learn about diabetes and so much to learn about healthy eating and I think we're just at an exciting time, because there's just so many different ways to make an impact on your blood sugars. And that's what we're here to do today, is to make an impact on your blood sugars. So we're going to talk about some healthy eating guidelines. And Miss Natalie, if you want to pull up those slides. Hang on, y'all. Technical things. So here we are. So you can pass that. You can change that one if you want to. And let's go to this one. So to manage diabetes successfully, we talk about exercise, we talk about medication, we talk about stress, sleep, and food. And I'm going to talk for just a few minutes about the exercise piece. So I like to share with everybody, exercise pushes your blood sugar down for 12 to 24 hours. Y'all, that's a huge piece, a huge tool in your arsenal that you guys have. So if you're not exercising, try to figure out how you can get that exercise in. It can be whatever you enjoy. It can be going someplace. It can be walking the parking lot. It can be, maybe you take a class. I love the yoga class that comes on the PBS channel at 6:30 in the morning. It's free. Stacy owns and runs the City Yoga down in Five Points. She does a great job. And we need a variety of exercise. So we need some of that stretching. We need some weight resistance. We need some cardio. But remember, exercise pushes your blood sugar down for 12 to 24 hours. That's huge. So you want to try to make sure that you're doing some kind of exercise for about 30 minutes. Start with 10 or 15 minutes and just add a couple of minutes on each time you go out. And before you know it, you'll be doing at least 30 minutes. And it's a good time to start. If you haven't had an exercise plan, it's a good time to start, because the weather changes. It gets easier as the day stays longer. It's easier to get out in the afternoon or the evening to walk. If you're at home and you want to walk mid-morning or right after lunch, like the Nike tagline says, just do it. I don't know why they don't, make money off of selling exercise and blood sugar control, because it's a huge tool in the arsenal. I'm really not going to talk too much about the medication. I really think that's a conversation between your pharmacist and physician. Stress. I've been working here since August, and Casey, and Roberta, my teammates, especially Casey and I, we check blood sugars in some of the classes that we do, and it's really crazy how stress impacts our blood sugar numbers. So we had a lady today, and she came in and her blood sugar was a little bit high, and it was just because she was super stressed. So we know that, doing something for stress makes a really big difference in those numbers. Again, one of your tools for stress management is exercise. Sleep. I'm embarrassed to tell y'all that I've been doing this for about, you're fine. I'm embarrassed to say that out loud that I've been doing this for over 34 years, you guys. And I did work in the cardiopulmonary rehab work. And in that world, we never talked about sleep related to weight management, sleep related to, heart disease, sleep related to blood sugar control. And we know that sleep is very important. So, we get the best sleep when it gets dark. And there's studies that show that you get your best sleeping rhythm is before midnight. So if you guys are late night folks, you might want to rethink that and try to get that sleep, when the sun goes down or shortly thereafter. So really work on those sleep habits. And then food, and that's what we're going to spend most of this presentation talking about, is food. So if you want to move to the next slide, Miss Natalie. And I know that you guys already know this, but we know that food raises our blood glucose and blood sugar are interchanged, but exercise, stress management, appropriate sleep, and medication can all lower that number. But the balance is the how. How do we figure that out? And in a world of social media and the internet and just everything coming at you, and everybody is an expert in diabetes control. And once your family or your friends or the people you go to church with find out that you have diabetes, I mean, they've all got a suggestion, they've all got a technique, they all know what's better to manage your blood sugars than you do. But there's a lot of diets out there right now. The Mediterranean diet, the low carb diet, the high protein, the low glycemic, the DASH, which stands for dietary approaches to stop hypertension, the carb control, the intermittent fasting. And I left two off of this list, but we're going to talk a little bit about them: the plate method and then the plant-based method. And there's a lot of research going on, and what we know about diabetes, and with the standards that came out, the guidelines that the healthcare professionals go by just came out, and they said basically meet the patients where they are. So, not one diet works for everybody. And that's kind of the same thing that they've been saying for some years now, is that what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So the key is to figure out what works best for you. And hopefully I'll give you enough information you can kind of figure out what's the right answer and what we have learned. We know that diabetes has to be tailored to each individual. There's no predetermined meal or plan or strategy. So when I first was a young dietitian, I'm sorry, Miss Natalie, you can change slides. What we used to do is we would hand out, a 1,200 calorie diet, or a 1,500 calorie diet, and we had these preset, and everybody got, it didn't matter, everybody got a predetermined menu. And that's not what we do anymore. There's no preset calorie, no preset carb levels, and it's very much based on you as an individual and your assessment. So how tall you are, how active you are, how old you are, all of those things play into, the assessment of trying to figure out what works best for you. Do you cook at home? Do you eat out? Are you leaning more towards that plant-based or vegetarian diet? Are you doing more of that Mediterranean diet? So it's just trying to figure out what works best for each patient. So let me give you some things to choose from. If you can change slides, Miss Natalie. the Mediterranean diet. So do you guys know about the Mediterranean diet? It is a diet filled with a lot of color, and color we know. And one thing, let me talk about diabetes for just a minute. Diabetes is an inflammatory disease process. There is inflammation going on. So we know that decreasing the inflammation, if we take in a lot of color, that really plays a role in decreasing that inflammation. And that's one of the things about the Mediterranean diet is it has a lot of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, a little bit of wine, lean meats, and very low intake of processed meats and processed foods. Let me back up for just a minute. A moderate intake of wine. So we don't do a moderate intake of wine. I told somebody in class today, I know I have girlfriends that think a little bit of red wine means a whole bottle of red wine. So if you guys travel to the Mediterranean, you get a little bit of red wine with your dinner. They don't sip on red wine all afternoon and all evening. So a very small amount. What that translates into is 2 glasses of red wine for gentlemen and 1 glass of wine for ladies. And what constitute a glass of wine is 5 ounces. So not very much. Do you guys remember the jelly jars that used to have jelly in them that had the cartoon characters on there, like Tweety Bird and Sylvester, and they would come with jelly in them? That's a 4-ounce jar. So a little bit more than that is a 5-ounce serving of wine. So it's not a tremendous amount of wine as we have interpreted that. So the other thing that's really cool about the Mediterranean diet is it uses a lot of monounsaturated fats. So some of the saturated fats that are so prevalent in our Southern diet are associated with, clogging our arteries or clogging that pancreas and helping, that insulin resistance to be even harder to change. So we want to make sure that we're using the right kinds of fat. So the monounsaturated fats, olive oil, the avocado oil, avocados themselves, nuts, walnuts have a great source of omega-3 fatty acids, so they're always a plus. Another really cool thing about this Mediterranean diet is it's got all those cancer-fighting antioxidants. There's not a ton of processed foods in this diet, and that translates into less sugar and less salt. Some of the things that are kind of a negative about this diet are sometimes it doesn't have an exact serving size or amount per day. And it doesn't, it doesn't focus on that macronutrient distribution. It uses vague terms like low to moderate intake or an abundance or often, which can be confusing, and it requires a little bit of definition and what that actually means. And again, physical activity and calorie tools are not specifically addressed with this. They do encourage a physical activity. So I put, it had a little bit of both on that Mediterranean diet. It can promote a little bit of physical activity, but we want to really make sure that it pushes that physical activity. So are you guys pretty comfortable with that Mediterranean diet? Do you lean on that Mediterranean diet? Okay, guys, are y'all talking back to me?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
It's the grains that always get me confused, like whole grains.
Right.
I like those Wassa whole grain crackers. Is that the same as eating, say, barley or,
So that's a great question. So I love that the Wassa too. So the thing with carbohydrate, with your blood sugar control is quantity and quality. I try to talk if you guys were to come to one of our classes, you'll hear me say quality and quantity. And that really just translates. So I would say the quality of the Wassa bread is on point. And here's the thing, quantity. And as with any whole grains, how much are we taking in? What is that quantity and how does it fit in? So, it's so easy to overdo carbohydrates. So you just have to make sure that you're doing a pretty good job of, you know, how much you're taking in. But the nice thing about the wassa bread is that it's crispy, and you're not going to sit down and eat a whole sleeve of it like you can with the saltines. So,
Right.
and oftentimes with foods that have a little bit more fiber in them, you know, I mean, it takes you longer to eat them, and so you're more physically satisfied. Great question. Yep. Okay. So
I've got a
the
question
DASH
about,
diet. Okay.
yeah, I've got a question about the nuts and stuff like that. Most of them are salted. Um, do you have a problem with buying those with sea salt, or just staying away from salt altogether? You
So
know,
it depends on how you mix it. Remember, balance. It's all about balance. So it depends on how you mix that in. So you might do, most of the time, I would say your best option is going to be what we would call raw nuts. And those would be the nuts that are unsalted. And the other thing is the nut folks have all of a sudden they're putting sugar on all the nuts. So you have to make sure that you're not buying those sugar coated nuts as well. So
right, yeah.
the raw nuts would probably be your best option. But what you might want to do is mix some of the salted and some of the unsalted nuts. Sometimes
Okay.
I do that. So it depends on what I'm doing. You know, if I have like a charcuterie board out, or that's a fancy way of just saying some appetizers with some, you know, leftovers in the refrigerator, some fresh fruit and some sliced vegetables, and I put nuts on there, I might put some salted roasted nuts on there because I've got some fresh fruit and some vegetables, and, you know, it's a good balance. If I'm doing something that, you know, if I'm making a salad, I'm probably going to put raw nuts in there because I may have a little bit more salt in my salad dressing, or if I put some cheese in that salad, it may. So again, we look at the balance. So it's, you know, I try not to say, don't do this, only do this, because I don't think that it's not a real sustainable way to plan your meals. And when we talk about this, we really want to try to make sure that we're choosing things that are sustainable, things that we can really put in place and really do.
Okay, one question on the wine. You
Okay.
mentioned that about 5 ounces is what we're looking at. How many glasses or ounces of wine per day? Is it 2 glasses per day, or was it
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
2 glasses for men, 1 glass for women
per day?
per day.
Okay.
Yeah, per day. Okay, let's talk about this DASH diet for a minute. Speaking of sodium, so the DASH diet is an acronym for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, okay? And it is very similar to the Mediterranean diet. The big difference between a DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet is the Mediterranean diet, they're not going to add a glass of milk in. They're going to have their dairy is going to come from a Greek yogurt. The difference between a regular yogurt and a Greek yogurt is that Greek yogurt is strained twice so that it's a thicker texture and there's more protein in there. So that's the big difference between, you know, the DASH diet is they're going to tell you, or they're going to encourage you to have 2 dairy sources a day. The Mediterranean diet does not do that. The DASH diet doesn't push the nuts and seeds like a Mediterranean diet does. But the color, the whole grains, the lean meats, the plant-based fats, that's definitely going to be, you know, a go-to in this DASH diet. It is not specifically designed for weight loss, but it has been used for a good weight loss tool. The DASH diet, there's not a lot of prepackaged foods that fit into that plan because of the sodium content. And the other thing is it can provide up to 55% of the calories coming from carbohydrate. And that could be too much for some of us that are trying to work on blood sugar control. There's a limited amount of research on its effect on blood sugar, but it does have less sodium, less sugar, less fat. And it is cool because it's designed to be an eating program for life. It's not something that you start on Monday and that you stop on Friday. So it's something that is designed to, you know, to go the long haul. Okay, let's look at this low carbohydrate diet on the next slide. So a low carbohydrate diet, and this is, I think, really important for you guys, this number, because I had to really dig to find this number, because I was like, there has to be some kind of guidance for us out there. So a low carb diet is about 26 to 45% of the calories coming from carb, and a very low carbohydrate diet is less than 26% of the calories coming from carb. So there's some pros and cons about this. So the pro to this would be, that you get some rapid weight loss. The con would be that you have to really restrict your calories from carbohydrates. And this can be pretty difficult for some of us. I always tell stories, so I'm going to tell a quick story. My sister has always carried a little bit more weight than I do, and she is pre-diabetic. So she decided that she was going to pay, she lives in Columbia, y'all. She decided that she was going to pay someone in Greenville some money to help her with her weight loss, because she was frustrated. She tried everything. And she paid a bunch of money, went to Greenville once a week, and she did lose about 25 pounds, but this doctor told her to do no bread, no rice, no potatoes, no carbohydrate. And she got under a wee bit of stress building a house, just a wee bit. And it was so convenient to do a baked potato with some chili or a sandwich. So she put back on 40 pounds because she had so drastically cut her carbohydrate content, and it wasn't anything that she could sustain. So there's some research around this, and there's going to continue to be research around this as, is this the right path for our folks that have blood sugar issues, or how does this fit in? So as we get towards the end, I'll try to talk about that a little bit. A little bit more, but one of the things that we need to be careful with, if you're going to go this path, is that you need to try to make sure that you take in enough fiber. So you need to really pay attention. And the more that they study fiber and that gut health relationship, they're learning that fiber is an even more important player on the field than we've realized in the past. Most Americans take in somewhere around 5 to 7 grams, maybe 8 grams of fiber in a given day. What's recommended is somewhere around 25 to maybe 35 grams of fiber in a day. So that's an area that we really need to pay attention to. So, there's more to come on this. I'm not really sure what the right answer is. And if this is something that can work for you, then we need to kind of, see how we can fit, maybe some supplements in, see how we can work on that fiber and getting it in. Then change slides, please. So one of the things about me, you guys, just so you know me, and if you call me after this and say, hey, I need to ask you a couple questions, I'm happy to answer that. And it doesn't have to be tonight, but whenever. I'm not really into the numbers thing. I don't want to have to read and calculate every number. And this low glycemic index is probably the thing for me, is you really have to know your numbers and you have to study this. And I don't know that I want to invest that much time, but that's just a personal thing. But it can be a really good tool to help with your blood sugar control. So one of the nice things is it can help you get feeling full and staying full longer, which can result with a little bit of weight loss. It can really have an impact on your inflammation. And what you may end up doing in a practical sense is blending some of this low glycemic index information with what you're currently doing, like a low carbohydrate diet. So just for instance, I know that if I'm going to have a sandwich, the rye bread would be something that I might choose because it doesn't shoot your blood sugar up as rapidly as maybe a piece of white bread. So again, you might garner some information from the low glycemic diet better than others. Okay, next slide. So the high protein diet, again, super popular. You hear lots of this stuff. I don't think you can turn on, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you're just turning on the internet. I mean, there's, you know, a commercial on TV. You can't walk through the grocery store without seeing some high protein diet, something advertised somewhere. So this is really hot right now. So, and it again, there's a lot of research going on to see if this is something that, you know, how it fits in and how we can use this as to, you know, help our blood sugars be in best control. So it's pretty quick weight loss if you are following a high protein diet. The other thing that really makes a big impact is you're satisfied. So you eat a meal and you're feeling full for a pretty good long time, which, you know, can really make a big difference in your blood sugar, because you're not constantly looking for a quick fix, and so you're not constantly snacking. So you know, it's got a real definite positive, a lot of positive attributes, and the foods are really easy to find. The initial weight loss may be due to some, you know, temporary water loss that you can, you know, when you're starting this, you can have maybe like a 10-pound weight loss pretty quick, but some of that's attached to a water loss. It can affect your mood and your energy level. It may take a little bit of time for your body to adjust to a different type of fuel and not very many carbohydrates. You have to be careful with the fat choices in here, because a lot of times your protein choices can also be often high in fat, and you want to make sure if you're doing lean proteins and not those proteins that are, you know, chock full of those saturated fats, those fats that us Southerners love. So, and again, there's that question of sustainability, and the rules are not super flexible here. So that can be a little bit daunting about the high protein diet.
Question about the high protein diet. So are we
Yeah.
talking about just meat, or basically what type of food are we actually talking about?
It's usually a lot of meat, a lot of eggs, a lot of cheese.
Okay.
We're
Mhm.
not talking about those colorful vegetables, those things that decrease the inflammation.
Okay.
So it relies very heavily on you know, a lot of meat. Whey protein is what you'll find in some of the products. Yeah, it's a lot of cheese, nuts. Yeah, some of those kinds
Right.
of things.
Okay.
Hey, is that more like the Atkins diet?
It is. Atkins, I think it's Atkins on steroids. It's been
Okay.
kind of, you know, really hyped up to be a lot of meat, a lot of bacon, sausage, eggs, those type of things. So again, you know, is that something that we can sustain? Not really sure.
It's interesting that it improves your cholesterol.
Well, and here's the thing, weight loss improves your cholesterol.
Okay. Okay.
So one thing that it doesn't change is it doesn't change your LDL. And you can remember L for lousy. The LDL is the lousy cholesterol. That's the one that gets stuck to the arteries and causes the havoc. And you end up with an up close and personal relationship with a cardiologist. Yeah. So, you know, again, there's more to come. There's, you know, I think the more technology has evolved, the more we're learning about the different diets. And the other thing that's happening in the world around blood sugar control and diabetes is this attitude that we don't have to have a one size fits everybody meal plan, and that, you know, not what works for one doesn't work for the other one. So I think that's really important, and we have to kind of, you know, see what works for everybody, and that's the plan that works best for you. So if I have someone that's going to work best on a high protein diet, I may start them there to get a little bit of weight loss, which is going to help with those blood sugars. It also, weight loss helps with everything. It helps your blood sugar to go down. It helps your blood pressure to go down. It helps your cholesterol levels to improve. It helps your joints, you know, to improve. It helps you look younger. I mean, you know, weight loss is just, it's so good in so many different ways. but it is, you know, what can we do to make it sustainable? So that's what we've got to figure out. So sometimes I start people here and then I just slowly migrate them over to, okay, let's add some vegetables in, let's add some fruit in, let's add some carbohydrates in. And you know, a lot of this is really about, you know, when we start talking is you the patient, you the person. How do we, what's best for you? What can you really do? You know, what works with you, what works with your family. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Excuse me, Kay, before you go into the next slide, I
Yes,
want to
sir.
ask you a question about the other issue that I'm having is that I've lost a lot of weight and I want to gain some weight. So
Okay.
how do we fix that? I mean,
Okay, so tell me about your blood sugars. Are your blood sugars in good control?
well, good control, meaning what, my numbers?
Yes, sir. When you go to get your, you know, your, when you go for your A1C or your numbers where they need to be, or, you know, is your A1C coming in under 7? What's it coming in at?
Well, it was crazy last time. It was up to like 9, simply because when I went for the blood test, I forgot about having a blood test the next day, and so you know, my numbers were high. But
Right.
prior to that, it was like 6.
Well,
And
that's probably not a fair question for me to ask. So
yeah,
if you went to the doctor, you know, the A1C is a
right.
test that measures your blood sugar sticking to it's the sugar in your blood sticking to the red blood cells.
Okay.
And they turn over about every 90 days.
Okay.
And so, you know, so let's look at, if you went to the doctor in January, you've got December, November, and a little bit of October in there. So, you know, that may not be a fair question for me to ask, but, you know, what you might want to do is,
Well, let me ask you this.
yeah,
Go ahead.
your body mass index is a good indicator of if you need to gain weight. A lot of times what we need to do is, you know, if you've lost weight, sometimes we just have to sit with that weight loss for a little bit to see, you know, how our body responds. But I think that's probably an offline question you and I probably need to talk about. Yeah,
we do. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
I mean,
I'll give you a call.
yeah, I'm so happy to help you guys. So let's go on to the next one. So now we're talking about, next slide, please. It's the carbohydrate control diet. And that's, if you came to a class that we teach, you know, we go to about 5 or 6 different practices and we teach a class called Basics. And we're trying to cram a 9-hour class into a 3-hour class. But this is the thing that we're using right now, is the carbohydrate control. So we try to tell patients to be consistent with their intake of carbohydrates, you know, day to day, meal to meal. So we want to make sure that you're taking in the same amount of gasoline at breakfast, the same amount at lunch, and the same amount at supper. So trying to make sure that your carbohydrates are consistent. So if you're doing, like for a guy, we would say probably somewhere between 45 to 60 grams of carbohydrate at breakfast, 45 to 60 at lunch, and 45 to 60 in the evening. For you ladies, we're probably going to say 30 to 45 at breakfast, lunch, and supper. And then, you know, trying to make sure that we look at the quality of what you guys are taking in. So we want those whole grains. We want whole wheat bread. We want rice that's brown out of the box. We want some quinoa in there. Farro would be something that we would want. Barley would be something that we would, you know, you're going to get a good bit of fiber with this plan. You're also going to, we're going to encourage you to do lots of vegetables. The carbohydrate controlled, the DASH diet, and the Mediterranean are all very, very similar. The thing that you have to pay attention with this thing is you have to, you know, portions matter. So it's that quantity that matters. Sometimes it can be confusing, and it takes a little bit of practice and discipline to say, okay, this is what I'm going to have my carbohydrates, you know, at breakfast, lunch, and supper. And I think that's where the discipline comes in. And it's important to know the numbers. And so let me give you guys an illustration. We had a lady come in the other day, and she's talking to me about her breakfast. Now, she's having the 32-ounce drink, right? And it's a Coke.
Wow.
Okay.
Somewhere between 90 to 100 grams of carbohydrate in the drink.
Yes.
She's having Bow Rounds from Bojangles, and they're about 68 grams of carbohydrate. And then she's having a sausage egg biscuit, which is 40 grams of carbohydrate. Now, I'm not really good at math, and I studied nutrition so I wouldn't have to do math, right? And here I am doing math. So she had 100 from the drink and 40 from the biscuit, and then she had 68. So that's about 110, pretty close to 110 grams of carbohydrate from the food, and then 100 from the drink. So she had in her breakfast 200 grams of carbohydrate, y'all. That's not, I mean, she didn't overeat. I mean, I wouldn't have said that was a ton of food, right? But that was an awful lot of carbohydrate.
Mhm.
So when we talk about carbohydrate control, we want to decrease that number. We really want to, bump that number down, to a more reasonable amount of carbohydrate. The other thing I like to tell people is try not to drink your carbohydrates. Try to really chew your carbohydrates. You're going to be much more satisfied. It's going to be much more manageable if you're chewing your carbohydrates rather than drinking your carbohydrates. So really trying to pay attention to those numbers and figure out where those carbs are coming from. And that's where it takes the practice. Sometimes, it's looking up those numbers. Now, you guys, I don't know whether I think I shared this, but maybe not everybody heard me say this. I am not tech savvy. But I have learned that my phone can really be another one of those tools that I have in the arsenal. So Siri and I go round and round, and we tend to have arguments. Most of those arguments are about her getting me someplace, her direction compared to my direction. But, I love the fact that I can say, Siri, how many grams of carbohydrate in a Chick-fil-A grilled chicken sandwich, and she'll pull it up for me, or how many grams of, carbohydrate in, Papa John's pizza thin crust, and she'll pull it up for me. So again, trying to use some of the tools that you have can make this whole process a little bit easier.
Mhm.
Hey, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Are you familiar with the bread that Costco sells? It's called SOLOS. It's loaf bread, but it's a small piece, and it's supposed to be 2 net grams of carbohydrates.
Right.
That's what I've been making sandwiches with.
Yeah. I think you're probably fine. I haven't looked at that one. I need to go to Costco. My membership is going to be up in March. I better hurry. But I'll try to make a note and look at it to see what it is. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just trying to make sure, you guys, that you really hone in and you make sure that the stuff that you're taking is looking at that fiber content. Turn those ingredients over and look at it, and try to keep them as simple as you can. I try to make sure when I'm looking at my ingredient panel that I can pronounce every ingredient on there. I want to be able to, look at it. And, there's just so much to learn about food now. The other thing I like to tell folks is I want to make sure that my food rots. I want to make sure that, I put it on the counter and it spoils. Charlie and I went to a football game, and somebody stayed at work longer than she was supposed to and didn't get to the grocery store. So sweet Charlie thought that he would help me out, and he would go to the grocery store, and he bought white bread for the game. Well, we took that loaf of bread up to Clemson. We brought that loaf of bread home. I put it in the bread box. It stayed in there for about 4 or 5 weeks. It did not grow mold or mildew. I should have been making penicillin. I should have had a penicillin factory in there with that loaf of bread, right? It should have grown something. I finally got tired of looking at it and I threw it in the trash. So, look at your ingredients. You want to keep your ingredient panel as simple as you can. You want to be able to pronounce the ingredients that are in that, in your product. So on that bread, I would try to make sure that you can look at it and, look on the ingredient panel and see if you, how long the list is. Do you recognize all the ingredients? What's the fiber content? Is the first ingredient whole wheat fiber? There's, you can get so much information off of a panel, of the nutrition panel.
Okay.
And I think we're going to try to do a grocery store tour sometime in April. I think Casey and I are going to try to do one for you guys. So next slide, please, ma'am. So there's this other diet out there called, a lot of people are doing this thing called intermittent fasting.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah. So you don't like it? Yeah. It's I have mixed emotions about it. I tried to do it. I could not get any weight loss going. But there are some pros. There is some nutrition research coming out that says it may, improve blood glucose levels. More to come on this story, but it's, I think we just don't know enough about it. It works for some people. My one red flag about this is a lot of people will say, hey, I've skipped breakfast. And so they just eat whatever they want. And that doesn't, if you're looking for a weight loss plan, it doesn't work that way. You still have to say, okay, I'm going to make healthy choices. Even if you've cut some of those calories out, you still have to make healthy choices.
Actually, I tried the intermittent fasting. One of the other nurse navigators at the hospital had been asked to try it by one of the oncologists, and she thought it would help her with her blood glucose levels because she was on insulin, and she lost a ton of weight. Now, she also mixed in some exercise with hers, and she was pretty much very strict with the food she was eating. But I did try it, and I like it, and I've lost like close to 20 pounds on it.
Good for you.
And have kept it on. But I haven't had like her level of success. But like I said, she was very rigid on how much, it couldn't be a baked potato. It was like a half of a half or something like that. And that might be all she was eating for lunch. But it hasn't been that hard because once I started thinking about it, you go to sleep maybe 8 hours or more. So
Right.
most of that time you're spending sleeping. So you don't have much time to deprive yourself. And so I was really skipping, not necessarily breakfast, but breakfast food. Like I like to eat grits and sausage and stuff. So I was skipping that and instead having brunch. So I might have had a frittata instead. And
Right.
I might have had, I just had lunch earlier and then just make sure I still ate 3 meals a day and tried to keep the carbs down in the nighttime when I ate. And I cut my eating off like at 9, but eventually I stopped eating like around 8 o'clock or 8:30, something like that.
It sounds like you were doing it sounds like you were doing a combination of things. Like you modified your carbohydrate content, but you're still, so intermittent, there are different ways that you can do it. You can, some people eat regularly 5 days a week and then they fast for 2 days a week, like nothing. Or they cut their calories down to 500 calories or less on 2 days. Some people do that 16 and 8, where you sleep for 8 hours and you have, let me see if I've got it right, 16 hours you don't eat and you only eat for 8 hours. So, I mean, it sounds like that's what you were doing. And then not only were you and this other nurse doing that, you were probably, sounds like you were both modifying your carbohydrate content. Yeah. So, I mean, again, I mean, I think the thing, if you're going to try intermittent fasting, the most important thing two things to make sure that you do, make sure that your medication, that, you've got it worked out, and that, because if you're taking insulin, I mean, it can really do a number on you, and hypoglycemia is a real thing, and it's very dangerous. So we want to make sure that your blood sugars don't drop below, 70. So that's the red flag with the intermittent fasting is, just make sure that everything is above board. And, I mean, you know, if you're going to do it and you have medication concerns, talk to your pharmacist, talk to your physician. They're your go-tos. Okay, next slide. So the next slide talks about the plate method. Okay, so the plate method is where you, and again, very similar to the DASH diet, carbohydrate control diet. It could even be low carbohydrate controlled, and the Mediterranean. It is super easy to use. There's no counting calories, no strict rules, a lot of flexibility, and this thing goes with you wherever you go. You could do it holidays, special occasions, when you eat out. The hard part about following this method is that it applies mostly to lunch and supper. And it can be a little bit challenging to adapt for breakfast. And if you do a lot of combination foods, it's hard to break it up. So it's basically, you have a plate, you divide that plate in half. Half of that plate is filled with colorful vegetables. A quarter of that plate is carbohydrate. A quarter of that plate is lean protein, a little bit of milk on the side, and some fresh fruit on the side. So it's really a low carb diet. But when I say it's easy to go with you, it doesn't matter where you have lunch or where you have dinner, whether it's a fast food, whether it's a hospital cafeteria, whether it's at home or another family members. You know, when you look at your dinner plate and your lunch and your dinner or supper plate, that half that plate should be filled with vegetables. So, I mean, you know, they're doing a lot of research around this, but this seems to be the plan that works best for most people because it's so easy and it's such a gentle reminder. Okay, half of my plate should be filled with colorful vegetables, a quarter of my plate carbohydrate, a quarter of my plate lean protein, a little bit of fruit on the side, and some dairy on the side. So that fits so nicely with that Mediterranean and the DASH diet. So next slide. Plant-based. Everybody knows the plant-based. Sometimes it's whole foods. Sometimes it's a vegetarian or a vegan diet. Again, it's high in antioxidant. It's heart healthy. A lot of people love this because it lowers the carbon footprint. It improves your hemoglobin A1C, aka that just means it improves your blood sugars. It promotes weight loss. Here's something that I just am super excited about. It influences and decreases the risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Here's the negative. It is easy to be very heavy in processed foods, too many refined grains and added sugars. So a lot of people think, okay, well, I'm going to be a vegetarian. And so they look for a lot of these vegetarian products at the grocery store, and they are heavily processed. So, you know, you kind of have to make an effort to make sure that you're choosing things that are plant-based, that are not so processed. And it can be a drastic change for some folks. You may need a little bit of calcium and vitamin D supplements. It can be expensive, and it may need some pre-planning. I'm gonna try to move a little bit faster, y'all. Okay, so the next slide. So what's the right answer? Because as you guys can see, there are a lot of different diet options, right? And they all work. I mean, you know, they're all doing a really good thing. We're getting a little bit of weight loss. As the weight loss happens, our blood sugar goes down, our blood pressure goes down, our cholesterol numbers improve. So figuring out what's best for you, what's sustainable, what can you do long term, and what really works best with you and your family. So what can I eat is an important question. Next slide. So focus on whole, unprocessed foods over processed foods. Try to eat the non-starchy vegetables. Again, those things that have lots of color. Some nights Kay McInnes goes home and she is really tired. Tonight, Kay McInnes is going to go home. She's going to be tired. She's been at it since 7 this morning. So I may just have all broccoli tonight for supper. Some nights, Kay McInnes, the dietitian, goes home and she is really proud. She's got some yellow and some orange and some red on the plate and some green on the plate. No matter what, half of my plate's filled with vegetables. So there's that plate method. Avoid or limit foods with that are have a lot of refined grains in them, trying to make sure that you're staying away from a lot of highly processed grains. Cereal. A lot of people think they're going to go on try to eat healthier, and they add cereal in there. So many of the cereals are refined. So much of our rice or potato products are refined. And be mindful about what you drink. Try to drink water instead of the soda, the sugary drinks, the naked fruit drinks. One of our clients yesterday, she was trying to make healthy choices, and she said she drinks the naked juices. Well, there's about 68 grams of carbohydrate in one of those drinks. So turn those drinks over and look at the labels. The body responds very similarly when you do the diet soft drinks and you sip on those diet soft drinks before a meal. The body tastes something sweet, so it sends a message to the brain, and the brain says something sweet is coming in. So the body starts to work just like it does on a regular soft drink. So try to make sure if you're doing those diet sodas and you're sipping on those things, I always like to tell everybody, mix that in with your meal so that it gets in with the mix. It's not that we don't want you to have them. Put them in with the regular, your regular meal so that it's all mixed in. Again, if you're sipping on something in between meals, water or the sparkling soft drinks with a little bubbly, those would be better options for you. You might do an infused water with some lemon, limes, or oranges in there. Try to focus on more of those poly and the monounsaturated fats and those omega-3s. Walnuts are a great source. Flaxseed would be great sources of those omega-3s. Olive oil, avocado oil would be those monounsaturated fats. The polys, I feel like we just get those in our processed foods. Trying to eat less of those saturated fats and those trans fats. Trying to stay away from a lot of that processed stuff in our southern foods. I don't know about you guys, but it seems like bacon is everywhere anymore on all the salads, on sandwiches and jellies and jams. Again, super saturated fats that we're going to want you to stay away from. So I always like to close with this thing that Michael Pollan said on the next slide, please, ma'am. He said, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And I think if you plan your diet around that, you can't really go wrong with that advice. Yeah. Questions?
One quick one regarding if I grind peanut, I go to 14 karat and grind peanuts. Is that better than getting a jar of peanut butter?
I do think it's a little bit better because you're not getting the salt or the sugar that's added to them. Now, you can buy the Smucker's Old Fashioned at the grocery store, and it's just ground up peanuts with a smidge of salt in there. So, but the way you're doing it is perfect. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yep, that's a great way to do it.
Okay, I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
And this has to do with kind of keeping an eye on your A1C.
Yes, sir.
I found on the internet that you could calculate your A1C by, when you do your monitor your blood level
Okay.
with the meter. You get a
Okay.
certain number. Let's say like 125. Okay.
Okay.
And if you were to add 46.7 to that and divide it by 28.7, that gives you the percentage of A1C.
Let's see. Calculate hemoglobin A1C.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So basically what I did was when I took my reading a little while ago, it was like 121 and I added 46.7 and divided it by 28.7, and that gave me somewhere around almost 5.8, something like that.
Right. Say what your number is one more time.
Okay, it was 120, 5.8. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay, so the last time I went to the to the doctor, which was back in January, I was surprised because I had no way of, I was looking at my numbers and knew that my numbers weren't really out of kilter, the glucose reading numbers from the meter. But I was shocked when I got to the doctor's office and had a test to check my A1C. And so now I have a way of, and this is what I wanted to ask you, is this a good method of kind of knowing where your A1C is at, kind of like on a daily basis?
I really don't know. I don't know that you need to know your A1C on a daily basis. I think the more important number to know on the daily basis is what that glucometer is showing you.
Mm-hmm.
And it should show you, most glucometers will show you like a 14-day average. And that's probably, for your day in, day out maintenance, what you need to be focusing on is that one number. And you want to make sure that, 2 hours after a meal, that number's running under 140.
Yeah, right.
And when you wake up in the morning, you want that number between, under 110, between 70 and 110. Those, I don't know that you really need to know your daily A1C, because it should change every day, just like your blood sugar changes, because your blood sugar changes like about once every 5 minutes. Your blood sugar is changing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not staying the same all day long. It's
Right.
constantly changing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they're doing a bunch of research, y'all, and the research basically says if you're doing a high protein diet, you're going to get a lot of weight loss for the first 6 months. After the first 6 months, between the first 6 months in the year, the weight loss is a slow pace. So that's, you've gotten the good out of that high protein diet, and then you may want to move over to, maybe a more carb controlled or a plant-based or the Mediterranean diet. Again, they're still really looking at, these diets to try to figure out which one is going to be the best. And there's, lots of different ways to skin this cat. It's just figuring out what works best for you as an individual. Okay, so if you guys need me and you have a question, probably the easiest way to catch me is my email. And my email is KJ McInnes. So let me spell that for you. It's MAC. You ready? KJ MACINNIS at .org.
Is it the name K or just the letter K?
The letter K.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I always forget.
That's okay. I do the same thing, so.
Yeah. Questions, concerns? Does this stuff sound like what you guys are already doing? Whole grains, half your plate filled with colorful vegetables, lean proteins?
Some of it.
Yeah, I was going to say, in a perfect world, yes. In reality, trying.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question about fiber.
Yes, sir.
Is there any advantage over like a supplemental fiber, soluble or insoluble type fiber?
You need
have an impact on your glucose?
You need a combination of both. And, the insoluble is the stuff that the body doesn't digest. The soluble is the stuff that the body works on just a tiny little bit. And it can help with cholesterol levels as well. So you need that insoluble. And there's a lot of research going on into your gut health and that relationship. So again, doing some dried beans and peas, keeping those vegetables as close to natural as you can. So a lot of people will peel a tomato. You want to leave the peelings on the things as much as possible. So cucumbers, tomato, when you do your fruits, you want to leave the peeling on those, like the apples, the plums, the peaches, as much as you can. Choosing things that have whole grains in them are going to have more fiber in them. So I think the fiber piece is a really difficult piece. It's not as easy as it sounds. So
No.
when you can, so when you can, like I love a salad with black beans or pinto beans on there. This time of the year, I'm doing a lot of soups or stews and putting some edamame in there. I might put some, some kind of a lima bean in something so that I'm getting that fiber. There is a diet plan out there where they ask you to do like a Metamucil type supplement like 3 times a day, and it helps. And the research is showing that it helps with lowering your cholesterol. So I wish there were that we could say that this is what you need to do, but it doesn't work that way. It's a little bit different for everybody, but I think the main gist of it is, we need to eat food, real food. We need to eat not too much, and it mostly needs to come from plants. And if we do that, we're going to get that balance.